Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're here in my session today. I'm Isabel Costa, and I'm a software engineer from Portugal. And also on the side, I'm a GitHub star and an admin for an E2B open source community. And I also work at Ecoboti in London. So this is a pre-recorded session. So if you have any questions, feel free to type on the chat because I'll be there trying to answer as much as I can. So today I want to share some tips on how you can make your GitHub profile look really nice. I want to talk about and show using my profile as an example on what you can set on your profile. So first of all, why should we care about having a good GitHub profile? So I have many reasons. One of them is to stand up when you're applying for jobs and showcase your skills and put your best developer image forward. A lot of new people are getting into this industry from different backgrounds other than computer science. Maybe they're self-taught or self-directed bootcamp students. And I believe that having a good GitHub profile can help them stand out and still present themselves as capable as someone who comes from a computer science background. So I believe that having a good, active, and complete profile can get you the first interviews when you're applying for jobs, regarding of your experience actually and your background. And also, maybe you have a side project that you work on in public and you developed in a way that can be used by others. I think this is amazing and should be showcased in your GitHub profile. And also, GitHub is a good place for learning how others code, how you code. So imagine someone that is looking at your profile like a recruiter or an engineer that or a manager who is looking for hire. If they look at your profile, they can get to know how you code, what you care about when you're writing code, and all those things. Multiple times in interviews, I got, whether it was a hiring manager or another engineer, mentioned that they looked at my GitHub. In fact, I remember being in a call and they were looking at my a project that I maintain as we were speaking. And I also remember a couple of years ago somebody saying, "Oh, did you end up solving that issue you had with your project?" And I was like, "Wait a minute, what issue?" And then I remember that I usually, when I create projects that I'm working on, I create issues to have an idea of the roadmap. So that's what they were referring to. So now that we know why you should care about it, let's take a look of some of the features. So I want to first talk about how you can prepare your GitHub profile, looking at the sidebar, the personal README you can have, how to pin repositories, how to look at the contribution graph and activity and organizations. So for that, let me just show you. I'll start with showing my profile. So let's see, the profile sidebar, what I mean is this part where you have your photo, your name, your username, a bio. Now you can also put a Twitter handle. So first, looking at the bio, you can have here whatever you want. I'm sure there's a character limit that I'm not completely aware, but if you click the edit profile, you'll eventually know where that limit is. But one important thing to know is that if you are collaborating with an organization that has organization page on GitHub, you can actually tag them. So for example, I have the place where I work at, I have the community that I'm an admin for. So this is just something interesting for you to know. I can also look at people's stars. So for example, when I find a good project on GitHub, I may put a star just to, so I can look at it later, for example. You also have the organization, which you can both link to an organization that already exists, or just put some text. In the location, you also can put where you are. I think there's a drop down if you go to settings, but you can also put any text you'd like. Sometimes I'm in Portugal, sometimes I'm in the UK, so that's what I choose to put here. And also you can put a link. And for example, this is my website. But imagine if you don't have a website, you can always put your blog, you can put your LinkedIn page. So you can choose the link you put there. It's up to you. And as I mentioned, you can put Twitter down. You can also put a photo. It's nice to have a photo. It doesn't have to be specifically a photo of your, a real photo of you. If you have like this brand where you have an image that represents you, as long as they're consistent across other platforms, you can put that image. And there's also this section of achievements. This achievement, for example, is there's some projects which are saved in the Arctic Vault from GitHub. So I get that achievement. There's also the types of achievement like sponsoring a project, and also if you contributed to a project that is up on Mars, you'll have a badge here. And then there's highlights, just as achievements, you don't have exactly control of what gets shown here. But in this case, because I was recognized as a GitHub star, it appears there. And then there's organizations. And this is a very interesting one because when you get into an organization, by default, your membership is private. And here, I'm logged in. So I can see all the organizations I'm a part of. However, if I was in incognito mode, you can only see, so incognito mode here represents if you were looking at my profile. You would see that I only have 4 public memberships. And that could be for many reasons. All you need to know here is that you can actually choose. For example, for Sisters Open Source, I choose to have my membership public here. And I can change to private. If I change to private, it would stop showing up here. So that's just a nice to know. Again, when you join a community, by default, the membership will be private, which means that other people won't see that you're there. Now that we look, now let's look at pin repositories and personal README. So everything that is not the sidebar. In case you don't know, you can have a personal README here. Basically, this is your repository with the same username as the same name of the repository is my username. And the README shows up on my profile. And you can also have that. And anything you put on the README will show up here. I want to mention that my personal README is very simple. However, you can really play with what you can do here. There's people who have some sort of automation that can even show their latest posts. So it fetches from their blogs and can also show, for example, the most languages that are used for that specific account. I just personally chose to have it as simple as possible, but you can put here whatever you want. And there's this repository, awesome GitHub Profile README, and you can inspect because all of these are open source. You can inspect what is the code, what is the what they have, the markdown they have on the README, and see how they're doing it. Now, pinned repositories. So you can pin repositories, or you can not have them pinned. If you don't have them pinned, instead of having pins written here, you would have popular, and GitHub would choose for you which repositories would show up here. In this case, I want to control what shows up on my profile, so I picked a few projects that I want to be visible. For example, this project that I once contributed to, and I was very proud of managing to contribute to it. The 2 projects that I mainly maintain, and a couple of personal projects. And as you can see here, this project isn't on my account, and I can still pin it. So it's interesting for you to know that you can pin either repositories that are from your account or repositories that are not part from your account. And you can do this here. Contributions graph. So another thing to know is that your private contributions can be public or private here in the contribution graph. So for example, I could have green dots here that actually you can see the contribution that I've made. Usually I contribute to open source, so most of the contribution will be public. But what I want to say is that if you have your private contributions being reflected on this graph, they will, it doesn't mean that they will show up here exactly which private repository you contributed to. It will just show up that you contributed to a private repository, okay? Yeah, so that's kind of important to know. And then, of course, you have the activity here that shows all the contributions you've made. So now that we looked at the profile part, let's look at how to make your project. So the idea here is, imagine a recruiter is looking at your profile and you want to put your best image forward. So you want to have a good README, topics in description, because this part will get reflected on when you pin the repository, it will show up there. You can also put a website, topics, the description I already talked about. The website is the deployed link. So in this case, it's my website. In other cases, for example, here is the Heroku page with the API documentation displayed. And another thing I would say, this is a stretch. I understand that everyone works in different ways, but I like to create issues for the projects that I work on, because I have an idea of the roadmap. I have an idea of the things that I want to do for this project. And I also create pull requests. I usually don't merge directly to the main branch. So for example, here's something I added, and I always try to have a good PR description, even if it's just for me. But I think this will let other people know how I usually like to work. And that's the idea of doing these little things, is to basically show someone who's looking at your profile, oh, this is how this person likes to work and collaborate with others, in case you contribute to open source. And of course, don't forget, you have this wonderful profile, and you want to promote this. And by promote this, I mean have it on your resume, have it on your LinkedIn, on your website, so that people can easily find it, and it's part of when a recruiter is looking up your social profiles. And our bonus slide, in case you are comfortable with or want to try to contribute to open source, this is a great way to keep your profile active. But also, the most important that I think is that it shows how you collaborate with others. So for example, when I'm maintaining a project, I have conversations with maintainers. I don't think this is a great example here, but I have been very active specifically in our community website. And here you would be able to see how I usually interact with maintainers. I usually, for example, I thank them for their contributions. In this case, I didn't have anything to request in terms of changes, but sometimes I have to request changes for contributors. So you could see how I interact with contributors. And also from a contributor's perspective, a recruiter can see how do you collaborate with maintainers? How do you communicate with the community to try to get your contribution across? So now, just to give you an idea, there's multiple ways to find open source projects. I want to mention just a couple of programs here. Of course, I have to mention Hacktoberfest, which is happening right now. And actually, I've been having a lot of traction in that project I just showed because of Oktoberfest. You also have Google Summer of Code. This is specifically if you're studying, if you're currently studying, you're eligible for Google Summer of Code. And there's also Outreachy, which is similar. I actually did Google Summer of Code. So these two, basically, a student, or in this case, Outreachy, it doesn't have to be a student necessarily, but basically you contribute to an open source community during the summer. Outreachy, I think it has more seasons. Google Summer of Code is the one that mostly happens in the summer. And this is actually the way that I was introduced to open source. First, I contributed to 24 pull requests, and that was actually the first contribution I've made. But when I was applying to Google Summer of Code, there were so many organizations that you can see here on organizations tab. And you can see that there's a lot of organizations. Yeah, a lot of open source organizations you can look up to. And usually if they participate in Google Summer of Code, it's because they have a good contribution process. So yes, this is just to give you an idea of open source projects that are out there, like Major League Hacking. And yeah, and you can always explore by tag on GitHub and find projects that way. And that's it. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed.